Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra video. Set 2 spoilers. Today's gonna be a little bit different because there's been so many. Riot is rushing to push them all out before the full set goes live tomorrow. So this is actually going to be about 4 different spoilers all rolled into one, so it's not gonna be the typical format that I've been doing up until this point, and then probably about an hour after this, we're actually getting the next 2, or I assume the last 2 champions, so I'll probably do like a part 2 video, but I kind of wanted to break these up at least for now. Otherwise, it'd be like a 30-minute video. So I'm going to go through this in order. If you've seen this kind of layout before, I've been the one that's putting these all together. And it's just a really great way to discuss them. And it's most important that we're going to be starting with the new keyword because you're going to be seeing it a lot is plunder. So plunder is going to be an on-play effect, assuming you hit the enemy nexus that round. So be it through skill, be it through, PNZ with a mystic shot or something, just you need to deal some damage and you'll get some kind of bonus effect. So you'll see that there's a few on here. Then we also got some more Freljord cards after this. And then in kind of the following cards that you're going to be seeing, you're going to see how it all comes together, right? And it's Bilgewater, kind of makes sense. It's all pirates, very, very on-key type of theme, and I'm really excited for it. But again, then it comes down to this change in the meta, right? Should I take this bad block just so they don't get the plunder effect? I think it's a great way to kind of reintroduce it or make, attacking relevant again in the sense of like how Ezreal and Karma have really been dominating the meta, and sometimes you just don't play creatures depending on what deck you're on if you're playing like War Mothers, because you have to wait till turn 5, 6, 7, 8 to play a big enough threat where they just can't mystic shot it for value, right? You make them use 2 or 3 removals other than Thermo Beam, obviously is still going to get you. So a little bit of a different discussion, but let's talk about some of these cards. So I think the first one that caught everybody off guard was Warning Shots. It's a 0 cost, deal 1 damage to the enemy nexus. And this is really cute because it's just a way to trigger plunder for free. But other than that, I think it's like a solid one of, maybe in some lists that are very, very, very plunder heavy, but otherwise not going to see a lot of play. At first, Jagged Taskmaster, the 3-drop 4/3, I wasn't that excited for it, but then I start to think about it. It says grant 1 cost allies. And when you think about 1 cost ally, right, you generally think about like a 1/1 or a 2/2, right? And they're all going to get +1, +0. But this also then counts for things like Yetis. And I'm assuming that also work like token generated effects like Spiderlings, right? Because it does say everywhere, which is really, really important for keywording here. So, so far, Bilgewater wants to be very, very aggro focused, and this makes sense. So I don't suspect that anyone's going to find the right 1 cost ally deck that's going to make this work and make it worth it, but in general, just a 4-3-on-3 feels pretty good. Obviously, the 3 is still going to do dotted things like get excited or gotcha, but still a very aggro focused card that I think can definitely see play. One card I think a lot of people have been split on is the Courier, the Citrus Courier here. Yes, it's a 6-drop, it's a 4/5, it's very beefy. You get to heal a bunch, right? And it says heal allies and your Nexus 3, so that's important. It is a Nexus heal as well, and then rally. I think this is going to be really good in more of those like mid-range beefy strategy games where you have like Freljord being the key one, right? Or today's spoilers, which we're going to hear right at the end. Gangplank, I think, is also another one that he's probably going to have more cards with him that play into this mid-game territory where this is going to be a very, very strong effect. And then just rally, as we know, it's strong itself. So I like this a lot, and I think it will see play. Is it going to go in every deck that's running Bilgewater? Probably not, but I think this will absolutely find a home. Card that might not find a home, or I'm not expecting to right away, is Smooth Soloist. This is very expensive, right? It's a 7-drop. It's understated for the cost, elusive 3/4, but it reduces the cost of allies in your hand and deck by 2. So like there's this really cute thing that you can do with like Professor Von Yip if it connects twice, right? You can make 3 drops into 1 drops or 5 drops into 1 drops. But that's probably not good, right? I think this is like a much later set 3, maybe set 4 type of card where you can ramp into it and then you can drop all these expensive Freljord cards, which there's some good examples here coming up. But other than that, 7 is just so late when you realize that a couple turns past that, Ezreal's just ending the game on 10 or 11. So is it going to be good enough to really cheat some things into play? I'm not sure, but hey, it might do something eventually. At least out of this batch of spoilers, the one that I was most excited for was Wolf Rider. And again, plunder means you have to damage the enemy nexus first, but this allows for more Freljord aggressive strategies, and they have Overwhelm naturally, most of the time anyways, right? So this is basically a 4/3 for 4 that has Overwhelm on top of that, then you gain an empty mana gem. What's important is because it has Overwhelm, you're more likely to trigger the next one, so you keep gaining these permanent mana gems turn after turn, right? So if you see the second one, you attack with the first one in play, has Overwhelm, you're going to hit the Nexus. Even if it dies, you don't care. You play the second Wolf Rider, you get another mana gem, right? And the important difference here is that it's not like Warding Stones where it's a temporary, right? It's not the only one per turn type of thing at the start of the turn. So Wolf Rider, you get the effect. You don't care if it dies, and it sets you up very, very nicely for the next one. Tusk Raider is also interesting too, right? So we see this plunder word coming down, but double the power and health of allies in your deck and then draw Sejuani. So I like this because it's going to be very strong and helping you draw Sejuani, have a very, very strong card that's going to finish the game. And I think this is kind of more of what we needed, right? So Freljord is the ramp region, so you're going to get this online earlier, but you need something that's going to combat the Ezreal in the way that it's going to end the game. So kind of I will go on this like, elephant in the room of set one. Ezreal's too good right now. He is the king of late game, and Karma itself too, right? You don't even need to draw Ezreal in all those matchups. Karma just being able to double Mystic shots and get excited can generally end the game itself. So you really have to figure out how you're going to combat this deck and still come online early enough where you can have the opportunity to attack 1 or 2 times, right? Because if they're on the Frost Ezreal package, they're just going to harsh wind you out. So they only have to probably stop 1, maybe 2 attacks that matter then. And if they're on the Will of Ionia version, they can just bounce your Sejuani, which was really big. Because again, Sejuani still costs 6, right? It's going to be a very costly card to get into play. So I love the idea of Tusk Raider. I think it's the better of the 2 boats. Probably by a long shot, just because of how good Freljord is to naturally play into this theme. But I think Swain's boat as well, Leviathan, can see some play in those decks because this tutor effect is just so incredibly strong. And then we finally saw the other side of the Stormclaw Ursuline is just a 5-drop 4/6 plunder effect. So this is really interesting because it's going to fit in nicely, and basically you're going to be able to play in a deck that your entire field is now going to have Overwhelm because they're all going to be 5 power or more, right? And if you think about Tusk Raiders, even if you're playing some of those cheaper units, Wolf Rider has it naturally, but just use that example. Let's say if it was just a 4/3, it then becomes an 8/6, which would then grant Overwhelm off of it. So yes, it does have to be in play. Yes, I think this is going to be a bit more niche in terms of how many decks it's going to be in, but it's a very, very, very powerful effect, right? Even the fact it's just a 6/6 with Overwhelm, that's hopefully going to give at least 1 or 2 other units Overwhelm, I think has been a very strong card to see. After that, we got Fizz, and there is a lot of drama going around Fizz, which is interesting. So I like this. The artwork is super colorful. It's very pretty to look at. All the sea creatures play well off one another. If you listen to the datamine voice lines, the interactions to them are just top notch. But Fizz, when you cast a spell, and I think that's kind of like the first part that people miss, this doesn't naturally have elusive. You have to cast a spell. He gains elusive and stops all enemy spells from targeting him. So what's important here is that you probably have like a Demacia list, right, that runs Radiant Strike. So then you have a really cheap as possible removal spell, but then it can also get around things like Withering Wail for 1. So it's going to be interesting, to dodge Vengeance, dodge, any of those single target effects, but Avalanche, right, is probably going to be a very big issue for this. And you still have to cast 6 spells over the course of the game, which is a lot. So I think that this is, a lot of people kind of overreacted, like, oh, elusive is getting so much better. But here's the thing that we need to stop for a second and break down. Let's talk about the top 2 elusive decks right now. Standalone variants, right? They have Rally, so that's Demacia and Ionia. And then you have Ionia, because again, that's the major elusive region right now, with Freljord, because you have Elixir of Iron, so you can save them from removal. Once you remove one of those packages from this, you're losing the benefits, right? So no more Elixirs or no more Rallies. And then if you're doing just Ionia and Bilgewater, for example, your guys are going to be very, very weak to various AoE effects. And as we saw today with Gangplank, there are now going to be ways to increase the AoE damage. Now, that's obviously in just one type of deck, but I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that are coming to prevent this. So you're losing a lot of the protective measures. Now, you might say, wait, what about Twin Discipline? Because you can give it +3 health. Yes, there are still limited cards like that, or even Deny, but generally, if you think about Fizz, how often are you really casting a spell pre-combat other than standalone, which, again, then the joke goes, and you don't have Ionia, you just have standalone Fizz, where you don't have, like, a Deny backup, right? So maybe that first standalone is good, but then how do you protect it past that, right? You have Radiant Strike, which is good for, like, the 1 or 2 battle tricks, but then after that, you very quickly have to exhaust your hand just to make sure it's hitting for damage, right? It's not like Zed, where you have the first, the quick attack, where you can strike first, and it's going to be, a 6 attack, which is very hard to block. I think Zed, in that case, is a lot better, and then, again, naturally in Ionia, but, again, then you don't have Demacia. So I think this is really great at showcasing where the balance with only having 2 regions really comes into play. And then for the champion spell itself, we got Playful Trickster. I don't like it, but rally effects are strong, and I don't want every rally effect to be playable. So you remove an attacking ally from combat to rally. So interesting, right? If you're trying to go into a board state, you might try to kill them and make a trade, but then you decide to save it if they use like a back-to-back or something, but then you're probably not attacking again. So it's the champion spell. I don't think a lot of people are going to be playing it, but interesting nonetheless. What I do like is that when Fizz does finally get that Nexus strike in, right, you get Chum the Waters, which is just really great at removing one of your opponent's units and getting in some overwhelm damage with that giant shark. So yes, it only has 1 HP, right? It's going to die to a sneeze, basically. But if it connects, and you're generally going to get like 2 to 3 extra damage, probably on average, into the enemy Nexus, it really helps those more aggressive strategies. But again, a lot of this is yet to be seen in terms of what else is Bilgewater going to have just to protect this kind of strategy and really, push us in one direction or the other, because Demacia has a lot of great stuff with it that you'd want, and so does Ionia, but you can't take both. So it is going to be a balancing act. And then one of the new keywords, too, we got was Attune. When I'm summoned, refill 1 spell mana. Again, playing into the nature of Fizz, but ultimately, I'm not terribly excited for these other ones, right? Shell Shocker is just nice because you can still have an early drop, which is going to be a more aggressive strategy, while still banking one from, as I mentioned, Radiant Strike. That's probably good enough. That's kind of where you want to be. Coral Creatures, again, just giving kind of that a random one cost spell, I should say. So you kind of see how these are playing it into one another, getting Fizz to, have extra ways to protect him. But by themselves, they're not really that great, right? There's so many better 1 and 2 drops you can get. Now, does the spell mana make up for it? We have to see. There's still so far not a lot of good spells today, but we'll see again, hopefully with the 47 more cards are to go or something like that. And then lastly, Bubble Bear. If I have to read standalone Bubble Bear one more time, I'm going to lose it. No, this is effectively the same exact card as like a flying defender wall in Magic. And you might be saying, oh, well, Magic has regeneration and all that stuff. That's not important. What I'm talking about is it's a defensive card that can help you survive against elusive decks. It's not meant to be attacking. It's meant to maybe have like back-to-back and like, ooh, gotcha, killed your guy because I have an elusive wall, right? But that's it. It's not something you want to waste buffs on, because I promise you there is a billion different better options at that point. You might say like, oh, it survives against Thermo Beam. Okay, sure. So they bounce it instead. Or, you dump 3 or 4 cards and make it +4/+5 attack, and that's not that great. Again, there's so much better card efficiency and economy that you can have in other cards. Please stop. Do not stand alone Bubble Bear. It's terrible. Don't do it. Moving on from there, we had Nautilis, which I was really, really excited for at first. And then I kind of took a step back. So Nautilis is interesting because it has toss, right? So my first thought was going to be, oh, sweet, it's a Maokai, right? You just push them together and you have a deck. Not really. So Nautilis, kind of by itself is whatever. Obviously, the level up side is really, really good. But what's really important is that your sea monster allies are going to cost 4 less, which we've only got to see kind of the first couple here. So we have sea monster, which is obviously really good. There was a basic 4/4 for 4, which could then become free, right? So it plays this more like, I want to go to the late game, but I actually want to just win off damage and not necessarily, self-mill. Now, could you maybe find a spot for 1 or 2 of them just to fit in Maokai to end the game sooner? Maybe, but based on the data mine, we're still missing 3 to 4 sea monsters. And right, if we're so far in this kind of category, we're just filling up our deck with these sea monsters, that just is going to be good enough. If you watch the preview trailer, it's not that hard. You'll likely end up in a board position where you suddenly have, 3 or 4, 7/7 or 8/8s on the board. And it's just like, all right, well, I guess I win now because I can just attack. And, you're generally chipping away your opponent's damage through that. Now, that said, Salvage, right, is a 4-cost draw 2, toss 2, draw 2. So the toss first is important. Even though it goes from the bottom, but like you get to see what information it had and help you plan out your turns better. I think this is a card that, just naturally, sure, it's going to fit because you want to be able to draw cards and it goes into your natural Maokai level up. But I'm not so sure that the other sea monsters are really going to play well enough together, if only because there's still 5 other Maokai cards, which we haven't seen yet, right? So I think that this is a case where the keyword was just used in both instances, and there might be some crossover, but it's not going to be like, these 2 things are shoved together and that's like the expedition deck, right? I'd expect 2 slightly different variations. But if we don't get any other Maokai support in terms of like things that you're doing in saplings, right? Like that's more of that early chump blocker, have a bunch of stuff die, you do Brood Awakening, as I mentioned in an earlier video, just have more things die, have chump blockers. Maybe that's not the direction it goes in, right? And maybe that there is just, hey, you have to rely on sea monsters and milling yourself. and maybe that's fine, right? I could definitely see that, but at least for how on theme all of this is with Nautilus and in terms of the direction they want to go, I guess I'd be a little bit more surprised to not see this kind of split into 2 sections. So going back to Nautilus, we have another new keyword, deep. Again, just means if you have 15 or fewer cards. Again, this says just once your deck. So assuming that, Nautilus, when you level them up, you put a bunch of cards back in your deck. So you just trigger it once and you're good. And at least, at the time of recording and what we know, that is to seem how it works. A 0-12 is not all that exciting, especially for a 7 cost, right? Because this just dies like Rhymefang Wolf, which is really unfortunate. But then when he flips, it's a 13-13 toughness and fearsome. So it has to be blocked by a power creature 3 or greater. So yes, I do like it. In some cases, this is just going to be able to end the game on its own. Because generally you're going to have like a 13-13 Nautilus and like 2 8/8s, right? So they're going to block the biggest thing, and then because they have to, and then your 2 8/8s get through. So eventually you're just going to be able to whittle down your opponent's board where you're putting yourself into a, just one-hit kill type of thing, which is fine. Riptide is a interesting one that in fact it gets a stun, and then if you have Nautilus on board, it's going to shuffle it into the deck, which is interesting because then keep in mind it's going to remove all the buffs. So this is a really, really strong card, very conditional. If they do like what we always say is tall, right? If they go out like double standalone, this could just be a 4-cost blowout. Yes, it's fast, so obviously deny is still going to hit and things like that, or they just might bounce it to their hand. But again, if they then bounce their card to hand to save it, you're still removing all those buffs, and that's perfectly fine. So I really like the stun here. We'll make the joke that it's Yasuo support because it's a stun card, but I think that's not necessarily what you're going to be doing with it. Jettison, we've talked about toss, right? So keeping in mind that Maokai wants to see 25 cards tossed and or allies died. So this is just a very, very strong card working towards that condition. Same with Nautilus, right? Because you want to be going down to 15 cards or less. So this is one of those things that if you are playing a toss deck, I assume that you're just going to be starting with 3 of these. Not as exciting is Dredgers. When I'm summoned toss 3, I think you just like the Shadow Isles ones better. Now, what it's going to come down to is how fast, right, do we need to play these toss cards, right? Do we need to play all of the units just to burn them out quicker? And maybe that is the case, right? But we have a very nice 2 and 3 drop that's available to us in Shadow Isles. So in a perfect world, right, we could actually go 1, 2, 3 in terms of drops that all have some kind of toss effect with them. And then you're, getting very, very quick to level up Maokai, which is what I'd like to see. Maybe that is what it needs to be, but kind of wait until we get the other, again, 47 cards, however many is left. And then Shipwreck Quarter. So this one's been getting a lot of hate, and I just don't agree with it. So it's a 7 drop. It comes down super late. It's a 7/5. The stats aren't even that impressive. When I'm summoned, toss 2 and shuffle 2 treasures into your deck. So I kind of have the 3 of them so far. I'm assuming that there's more down here. Plateworm Egg, Treasure Trove, and Keelbreaker. And everybody has been complaining about Treasure Trove. As someone who has literally spent the last 2 days playing Barkeep, let me tell you, it's not that great. It's not that exciting. It's really not. Sure, you're going to remember like the 1 out of every 10 games where you get like that super high roll, but it's going to be less impactful than pre-nerf Elnuks were. And, obviously I think everyone agreed that Elnuks then were a problem, but Treasure Trove, because as we're adding more cards, it only gets worse because there's more dead targets that you can potentially hit. It just doesn't feel great, right? And then you also still have to pay the 5 at slow speed to do it. It's going to be very difficult to really, high roll and feel good about it, where you might just be getting a bunch of crappy, 1 and 2 drops, right? And it's random, so it is going to be in your region, so that's going to also have some effect on it. Now, Plateworm Egg, I agree, is very strong. I love it. And then it still offers up the, Ruination counterplay, right? You're going to have some very, very big units. They start as a 5/5. Basically, by that point, they should be 8/8s regardless. And then they still have Fearsome, which, again, Fearsome might not be that important if we see more of these like mid-range strategies pop up where they're going to be able to block it regardless. But 8/8 should be enough to eventually push through the damage that you want to. And then Keelbreaker, right? Deal 5 to all units. So your stuff's going to be bigger. It should be a, quote-unquote one-sided board wipe, but at the same time, you're then putting yourself at risk of your opponent just having cheap removal to finish you off. So I really, really like these spoilers. We have to see what the other 5, Shadow Isle cards are, and obviously way more of Bilgewater, but I think whatever the last remaining support for Maokai is going to tell us how we build these 2 types, maybe 2 different types of decks, or again, maybe they are the same type of deck. But I think it's going to be one you're building to play strictly to the mill condition, and the other one you're playing strictly to the treasure and, Beasts of the Depths or the sea monsters, right? Because there's still, I think there's Eyes of the Depth, Devourer of the Depths, and there's one other Depths card, which If those 3 cards don't then also have deep, I'm going to be very, very surprised if they're missing that keyword. So yet to be seen, but I'm very excited to get the rest of these spoilers, which again, we probably won't see those ones until the 27th. So tomorrow when the full visual spoiler was up. And then the last one is going to be Gangplank. And I did put this card down here because it's very, I don't think a lot of people saw Gangplank Shredder in set 1, and now it's hilarious. So I'm actually going to start with Powder Keg, right? So it's a 0 cost, very on flavor for Gangplank, but you're going to be getting to a board state where you're just stacking up a bunch of powder kegs, and it says all your spells and skills deal 1 extra damage. So in theory, right, you get 3 on the board, which we don't know how easy or difficult this is going to be. There's a lot of speculation around that, right? So because they stack, does that mean when they get attacked, you lose 1 barrel? Do you lose the entire stack, right? Is it based on power? There's a lot of different ways that they could do that, but then potentially Gangplank Shredder comes down and you're dealing 3 or 4 damage that's one-sided to your opponent. That's going to knock out a lot of decks, right? And it comes down to how quickly can we really stack up these powder kegs and keep them around. So again, looking now back to Gangplank, when you've damaged enemy nexus 5 rounds this game. So again, we see like a PNZ Noxus type of strategy. And then also this is the same exact wording as Sejuani. So if we see, enough reach or fix that can hit the enemy nexus, we could even see like a Sejuani Gangplank deck. Now, is that going to happen? I'm not sold on it, but it's very interesting. And I love that right before the spoiler went live, I tweeted out, it's going to be a more mid-range, beefy stat line. So it's a 5 cost 5/5 with Overwhelm, which is great. And then again, he's going to summon a Powder Keg when he comes in. But really more importantly is his level up effect. At the start then of every round, you're always going to be able to threaten that Powder Keg. And then keeping in mind, right, so you're on attack, you summon a Powder Keg, that's 1. If you attack them, it's going to use it. But if you want to save them up, you then force your opponent, when it goes to their turn, maybe they have to open attack so you kill your Powder Keg so they can develop the rest of the turn. So I really like this because I think it's going to have some very interesting kind of back and forth board battles where your opponent has to decide, okay, my opponent's on, let's just say 7. How many Powder Kegs can they create this turn? Should I just attack with my weakened enemies just so they can't play more cards, right? It's going to be very difficult for your opponent to decide, okay, they have 3 or 4 kegs, what do I do? And maybe they just have that removal and they get it out of the way really quick. But it's going to be interesting because it's going to make combat matter so much more. And then interestingly enough, Gangplank, deal 1 to all enemies and the enemy nexus. So again, playing into the Powder Kegs. If you get even 2 of the Powder Kegs on board, right? Suddenly he's hitting for 3 to everything. That's insane. That's like really, really good. So I could actually see kind of the way that I'm like envisioning where this is going to go is that you have these turns that are going to be like more combo driven where you're saving up. Gangplank is going to flip. He's a 6/6. He's actually very tanky, right? And then in the course of a turn, you're going to be dropping 3 or 4 kegs. And then suddenly your opponent's going to be like, okay, well, if I don't have like an avalanche or something, I guess this is it. It goes into your turn. You open attack. 5 damage across the board, right? Hit the enemy nexus. That's very, very strong in some cases. That's basically a decimate worth of damage that you're getting because you were able to stack the Powder Keg. So I love it. I really want to see where this goes. Again, I typically am not going to start with a more mid-range strategy, or this might even have a little bit lower of an aggro curve, and maybe Gangplank is just the finisher. I'm definitely starting with Nautilis and Maokai, but I think like my second list is probably going to be this, assuming that Misfortune also is kind of more of this, play heavy against the board type of strategy. I know she won't have barrels and stuff. She might have like a bounce shot or something, but either way, awesome stuff. And then of course they showed us parlay as well with deal 1 damage to anything, and then if it kills it, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So again, keeping in mind that if you have 2 Powder Kegs, it suddenly becomes a deal something 3 and then deal 3. So you have to keep in mind how this is going to affect all your cards. And what's nice here again is it's just a very cheap ping effect where it's going to help level up Gangplank. Moving in to our other aggro units, we have Jagged Butcher, which everyone's saying, oh, this power crap Cytheria. You have to keep in mind, you have to deal the enemy damage or the enemy nexus damage before you get that +1/+1. So technically, still at the, the value of 1 drop versus what's it going to do. Cytheria still has the elite tag, so she can still get buffed. If you play it off curve, this one, you can be a 3/3, but generally speaking, you want that elite package synergy where this is really just meant to be more of a 1 drop in Bilgewater, maybe playing it like on turn 2 or turn 3, right? You don't always want to be playing it on turn 1. And that's something that we have yet to see. We need to know what type of, you know, one drops that Bilgewater is going to have, other than just relying on like, okay, Noxus, right? Noxus go Nexus and go fast. So sure, that's probably a thing. Then this comes up, but you weren't running Demacia in those lists anyways. There wasn't a Noxus Demacia aggro list, right? So it's kind of a weird, you know, point to make, but I think people need to kind of like take a step back and look at, you know, the pros and cons of it and what that actually means. Then we have the Dreadway Deckhand, so a 2-drop, 2/2, fine for stats, summons a powder keg. Again, kind of more in that like combo-y types of turns that you really want, where maybe you just drop 2 of these in a turn, Gangplank gives you the 3rd, and then you have this big explosion. So I really like it. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that it can do with it. And then Petty Officer, summon a powder keg or a random cost ally from any faction. So it does say faction in here that they confirmed it meant to say region. It's kind of a little misword here, but that's fine. And I think a lot of people see this as pure RNG. I'm assuming that this is going to work like Twin Discipline, where you pick, right? So if you need another unit to be more aggressive, then obviously you just get a free 1-drop ally, right? So this is kind of like a weird House Spiders. It just costs 1 more, but then you can get, you know, potentially a 2/2 or better stats, right, than the House Spider just giving you a 1/1. Or if you're in the more I'm an all-in powder keg strategy type of deck, then you're suddenly getting more ways to stack on the powder kegs. Now, how good is a random 1-cost ally going to be? You know, sure, we'll take a look once we get all the spoilers out, but I'm assuming that this is only going to be played in a powder keg type of deck, but otherwise, we'll see. And then hopefully after all that, again, Gangplank Shredder coming in 3 or 4 damage. I really like it. I think PNZ is going to be a pretty good spot with this, right? Because then you also get like Boom Crew Rookie, which is going to help level up Gangplank as well. And it's tanky, so it's going to give you multiple turns to do it. I'm super excited. All these spoilers have been really, really solid. And again, I'm sorry for doing this a little bit different of a style for a video, but I kind of wanted to talk through all these very quickly. And I'm sure based on time, about an hour and a half from now, we should get another round of spoilers starting up. And then I'll wait for like the last 2 and we'll do a kind of final wrap up. And then I might also do like a all of set 2, where do I rank them, where do I start with, and all that kind of stuff video to go out on Monday. But again, it depends on what time Monday they give us a full card visual spoiler. So I really hope you guys are as excited as I am for set 2 Runeterra. I mean, we've been dealing with set 1 for a while, but all these cards look so fun to play with, and also that they're going to shake up the meta quite a bit. So after Tuesday, I'm doing like a 12-hour stream. I'll put up a video on my list and kind of my works in progress. But if you want to see more Legends of Runeterra content, don't forget to subscribe. I'll have more videos up. Trying to do about 2 a week once this spoiler season's ended. We'll fall more into that groove. But then, of course, you can find me at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on Twitch for more Legends of Runeterra content. So with that, I'm out. I have to go get ready for the next spoilers, which I'm sure are coming out soon. And with that, we'll see you next time. Cheers. We'll be right back.